So yeah, I mean, really just to say welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today at this showcase of research projects funded through Landscape Research Group's Research Fund. I'm Rachel Domini, I'm Director of Operations for Landscape Research Group. And I will be doing some fiddling with buttons, letting people in and things. So apologies if I appear a bit distracted. I'm sure you don't need it, but a quick introduction to LRG. Landscape Research Group was founded in 1967, and we describe ourselves as a global community with a shared interest in landscape, from natural to urban design. We publish an academic journal, Landscape Research, which is now in its 50th year, I think. We support global networks of interest in the world of landscape research, which currently include a regular coffee hour in America, and a similar new group has just launched for Portuguese and Spanish-speaking researchers. There's a German language research network, and there's in the planning we have a landscape law network. We run events like this, and critical field studies. Our next one will take place in Cairo in September, which is hugely exciting. And we provide funding, of course, for research projects, which is why we're here today. And Merham will talk some more about that. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session, and an edited version will be made available online in due course. There are 5 projects that we'll hear from, each giving us 10 minutes. And at the end of that session, there will be a Q&A session. So please add questions to the chat or save them up for the end. So Merham, I'll hand over to you now. A quick introduction to Merham. She is a trustee of Landscape Research Group, a much valued trustee. She's our research coordinator and also an associate editor of our journal, Landscape Research. She's also the driving force behind this year's critical field study in Cairo. And beyond the world of LRG, Merham is assistant professor in the Urban Design and Planning Department in the Faculty of Engineering at Ain Shams University in Cairo. Over to you, Merham.
Thank you, Rachel. Welcome you. I'd like to welcome you all today for this very exciting research showcase. As Rachel introduced our event for today, I would like just to give a very brief background for our research funds. Stemming from our commitment to landscape research in the Landscape Research Group, we started the LRG annual funds in 2017, and we are going strongly now. The funds are open to all members, and they are always evaluated based on merits and commitment and connection to each year's theme. Our call for this year is now open. We would like to invite you all to have a look and apply if relevant. Our theme for this year is landscape and mobility. It's a really exciting theme. I think it links to most of the very up-to-date crazy world we are living in. So it captures this dynamism. And today we are celebrating 5 of our funded projects from 2 consecutive years, the 2023 and 2022 cohorts. The themes for this year's were Empire and Landscape in Dialogue for 2022 and Landscape Self-Care for 2023. We will have 5 presentations today exploring topics like walking in Spain, community gardens, Ireland's borderlands, colonial landscapes, and politics of heritage. So I think they are all exciting research topics we'd like to know more about. As Rachel mentioned, each team will have 10 minutes to present their work and findings. It will be recorded and we will upload it to our YouTube channel just for reference and for anyone who is interested to know more about the research. Please visit our LEX website, which is companion website to our Landscape Research Group website, where we have some of our blogs and short articles on different topics and specifically our funded research projects. Yeah, and I think Rachel covered the housekeeping of the session, so I won't repeat that. So I'd like to invite our first presenter. We'll have 5 presentations, as I mentioned. Maybe I will just mention your names. First, we'll start with Shirley, Chubb, and Clair about walking with Spain. And then we'll have Tom O'Clay, Sorry for the pronunciation. I'm not sure if I got it right. He will be talking about Hedge schools, and Jens Hendler about conflicts, colonial landscapes, Ioana Petkova and Valerio Massaro about community gardens, and Michael Feinberg about politics of heritage in the Caribbean. So I'll pass the floor to Shirley, Chubb, and Clair Hebron. So please introduce yourself first briefly, and then take us through your research journey.
Thank you, Merham.
Thank you.
Excuse me for 1 second. I just need to do a little bit of Zoom tech.
Sure.
Okay, so. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that and hear us. I'm Shirley Chubb, and I'm co-lead of the Posthuman Walking Project with Clair Hebron. And we're going to give a short presentation today, and just to say that the images that you'll see are all stills from videos that we made collectively with between the academics and our walker partners. And all of the videos can be seen on our Posthuman Walking Project website and also via the LRG, as can podcasts. My interest has come from a long-held career in developing visual responses to particular sites and particular locations. And Claire?
I'm a physiotherapist by background, an academic who works in the critical space and with more philosophical and sociological concepts than evidence like randomized controlled trials, which are more typically the focus and the philosophy of physiotherapy.
So just to start with the slides, the Posthuman Walking Project focuses on experiences of walking with pain. We've taken a wide approach to what the nature of that pain might be in this instance. And what we're really interested in doing is exploring how more than human approaches to creatively investigating urban and rural landscapes can be expressed through the experiences of walker partners who were invited to take part in the project. From the outset, we used mobile phones as a sustainable approach to documenting the walks, and we've taken a collaborative and we hope de-hierarchized approach to data collection and consequent discussion. From the outset, we wanted to reconfigure the boundaries between our walkers, the researchers, and the site, and walkers and academics met together bi-monthly in online meetings.
So our project network was a transdisciplinary collaboration of critical physiotherapists, artists, and walkers who were persons experiencing persistent pain from diverse backgrounds. And we were from different partner countries, the UK, Philippines, New Zealand, Canada, and Norway, and we all had a collective interest in exploring the experiences of pain in ways which respond to the unique relationship and entanglements between walker pain, landscape, and environment.
So the project very much acknowledges the different socio-cultural contexts of the walkers that we worked with, and the human and non-human relations that became formative parts of the creativity of the project. We, from the outset, adopted an ethos of embedding walker partners within the research process, and we questioned notions of power and knowledge within research methods by working as equals with the walkers rather than observing them as such. The use and familiarity of mobile phones we felt was a way to normalise the process of data collection, and we really wanted to avoid some of the anxieties about competence or skill that often accompany creative approaches to research. So from the outset, we sought to reassure our researchers and the walkers that there were no aesthetic expectations of the way that they filmed, and that rather than following a process, that they and we should all see their mobiles as an active tool that was there to capture the immediacy of their environments.
This project is quite innovative in terms of physiotherapy research and practice, because both practice and research are really quite limited to the confines of the clinic and quite dislocated from the context in which persons live. There are a few innovative pain programs in the UK which do incorporate some creative art practice, but again, it doesn't explore the entanglements of pain, landscape, and culture in persons' unique contexts, and it's still dominated by humanistic thinking. In our project, the walker partners were initially accompanied by physiotherapy academics and artists like Shirley during their walk, but we came to realize that it was clouding the emerging relationships between walker and place, particularly when we were directing the focus of their attention and almost interviewing them as they walked. It was about our what we were bringing to this walk rather than really them exploring their context. And it was evident that this was shaping the walker's experience, and it was all from very much an human eye level. And as in our project meetings, we were discussing with the academics and the partner walkers about these films and the entanglements. And in the when we were sharing those initial project films, we were sort of realizing that the human was remaining so dominant in these films. And Fee, in the second image here, one of the partner walkers said it's almost like it's doubling the human. So then we loosened and our openness, we loosened those boundaries. And as the project moved rhizomatically, the academics withdrew from the filming process, and the partner walkers started walking on their own.
So as our understanding of the agency of the filming process itself began to grow, the power and the locations themselves became more fully understood by us all. And what we felt was that the landscape became a carrier of an emerging method where different knowledges could intersect through the visual outcomes of the films. As a team, we've been very interested in new materialist approaches, and what was happening seemed to reflect Karen Barad's observation that, and I quote, "We don't obtain knowledge by standing outside the world. We know because we are part of the world. We are part of the world in its differential becoming." So these processes of discussion and filming, as they began to accumulate, led to questions about what the posthuman of the project was and how, if at all, it might be achieved. And that prompted us to actively seek alternative ways to film and collect data and how we might order that. So at this stage, I began to explore myself how the immediacy of the mobile phone could be used to document walking in ways that replaced the human eye level that Claire has just mentioned. I explored and experimented with filming in reverse, holding the camera up to capture the movement of my hand, and also, most significantly, attaching the mobile to my foot. And what that then captured presented itself to the lens from a completely different perspective, and these are the images here, which are stills from the film that you can see. For me, the results were revelatory in the way that they recorded the impact of a human footfall and also how they revealed complex shifting viewpoints as my foot met the ground. And there was a certain amount of vulnerability on my part in sharing this very raw footage with the group, but it was fascinating. It led to fascinating discussions, and that in sharing the purely experimental, we felt that the project began to reflect some of the commentary of people like Sam Pierre, who says that the goal of post-qualitative inquiry is not to systematically repeat a pre-existing research process to produce a recognisable result, but to experiment and create something new and different that might not be recognisable in existing structures of intelligibility. Claire.
Yeah, so this new responsive approach motivated the walkers to explore new and other techniques themselves, which you see reflected in these images here. And the footage was becoming more impactful and reflecting more their relationships and the multifaceted nature of the environments they walked in. These more reflective approaches to documentation were more receptive to landscape, weather conditions, and the environments of walkers in different partner countries. And in our discussions, we started to come to realize that we were missing in our articulation of the project what was an essential collaborator and the centrality of the landscape itself as the core partner in this collaboration. We did feel that the use of mobile phone was a conduit for qualities of light, sound, surface, and movement. And you'll hear in some of the films how that varies within the different films, particularly Lena in the midnight, in the midday night, polar midday in northern Norway, where the wind is buffeting the camera and she chose not to deaden that sound. And this reflected really Donna Haraway's idea of a making with between the walker and the environment.
So one of the things that we increasingly recognised was how the difference of individual experiences really came to the fore. And by this time, the walkers were predominantly walking alone, and they felt a real sense of release in doing that. Some of them walked, some of them talked whilst they walked, others were silent. And one of our walkers, physiotherapy at the time, a student of physiotherapy, Natalie, wrote poetry, and we'll hopefully have time to see that film in a moment. Increasingly, I and Claire liaised online with the walkers and with the academic that they were working with to kind of refine and process their films. And it became really interesting to see how the reflexive use of the editing software really came into its own as we allowed it to question how we might represent things. I think in conclusion, and so that we have a little time to watch the film, which is just a minute long, we felt that the cumulative process of the PWP was enabled by the collective exploration and the shared thinking between the people who have taken part and the way that they've opened up to the agency of the landscapes they walked in. We were open to debate and revealed multiple perspectives that were enabled by allowing an immersive engagement with the landscape. And this has led to new insights that capture the convergence and complexity of codependent entanglements and that have moved us away from a human-centric perspective. In this way, we felt that we began to realise some of what Modine and Biggs refer to as of ourselves as ensemble creatures in permeable states of being in the world. So hopefully now, if we're okay, can I show the film? It's just a minute long. Here we go. Just a few references there, and I'll stop sharing. Thank you very much. Apologies if we ran slightly over time.
Thank you, Claire and Shirley, for this really interesting project. I think the results are fascinating and I think thought-provoking indeed. The video, I think, also captures most of what you have been discussing in your presentation. So thank you for sharing this with us. And I'd like to invite you all to go to their podcast and visit their website. I think it has really, really interesting stories that might engage you. So now we are giving the floor to Tom.
Hi, thank you. Let me just share my screen and I'll share the full thing. If you can all see me. So hi, my name's Tom O'Quailey. I'm an artist. I also teach at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, and thank you to the Landscape Research Group for funding this project. It was so helpful and actually really transformative for the scope and the looseness and the development of the project. This is one of three kind of long form projects that I've been working on related to the contested border in Ireland. The first was a drive along the border, the second kind of relating to previous presentation. I walked the length of the border, you can see just there where my cursor is, all the way from Derry round to Carlingford. I made a book, and this third project was a hedge school. And over the course of these three projects, the border becomes increasingly hard to see. And ultimately, this kind of poly-situated project that I'm going to share with you now, the border becomes almost invisible, and that's intentional because the bigger argument for all these works is finding ways to dismantle or resituate or review or different perspectives on the border in order to create a space to imagine the island of Ireland differently as a practice of decolonisation. So just to give you some geography, here is Ireland. If you can see that, you can see the line of the border that's existed for the last 100 years. The number of sites in this project are kind of quite complex. There are sites where I found and bought materials. There are sites where I had different kind of conversations. There are sites where I had different installations, which I'll show you as well. And then finally, there's a site a long way from the border, and I'll explain why, on Clair, where I had the final performance lecture and exhibition. So the contested border that you can see along here has existed for the last 100 years. It's 500 kilometers long, and it's divided the 6 counties of the north from what is now the Republic since 1921. And since January 2021, the UK from the EU. You can see here kind of an image that highlights some of its idiosyncrasies. It's kind of, I think it was, to borrow Brexit parlance even 100 years ago, a fudge. And it divides buildings, farms, communities, villages right down the middle, and has never been a normal kind of border. There's no other border in the world that exists like it, one where you can choose, thanks to the Good Friday Agreement, the nationality of what is legally the neighbouring state. And my work began before Brexit. The referendum happened in the middle. I had to navigate all these kind of sensitivities throughout, and I've had to embrace that kind of chaos, really. And one of the key things that I started to embrace was this term alternative arrangements, which originally came out of I think it was during Theresa May's negotiations about alternative arrangements for goods and services relating to the border. I took this term, and all of my work relating to it has been about taking sites, landscapes, histories, buildings, materials, perspectives, overheard conversations, myths, gossip, hearsay, to create these arrangements of what happens when you put these two things together, or more than two things, as a way of creating a space for something different. I began to kind of document all these different materials that are kind of along the border architecturally and through landscape materials. And I guess it's worth saying that a hedge school, obviously by its name, or skull skirt, in Irish is an Irish pedagogical precedent from the 17th and 18th centuries, when Catholics and other non-Protestants were barred from accessing formal education. And these ad hoc schools, they weren't always in hedges, but they were in barns or what have you, and were located in the landscape. So there was a place for landscape learning. And this school, I position this school as, well, it's both, you know, a hedge as a boundary in a landscape, a hedge as the boundary between two places, between different practices, a blurry edge as well. I think that's important. And as a way where me as the learner as well, as much as I am the student, as much as the instigator of this school. This is the Landscape Research Group funded the kind of second phase of this. It began with some public engagement funding, where I began to interview different experts, such as, this is the archivist Johnny Dillon from the National Folklore Collection at University College Dublin, to a Brexit trade negotiator, to Kerry Doherty, a nature writer and a historian, as well as kind of other. They're also experts. They didn't see themselves as experts. People who made HGV curtain sides, people who made signage along the border, people who made concrete blocks that was taken from a hill that's cut in two by the border. So the lime and clay that is made up of these kind of breeze blocks is actually made of the borderland itself, as well as classical columns and other architectural motifs from the borderland. Here I am kind of going, and in each of these places I would interview the makers of these materials along the border, these kind of the purpley kind of pins here, and then I would always go and buy some of these materials as well. So the second phase that was funded by the LRG actually began to take these materials and then reinsert them back into the landscape in sites of historical interest. These became this series of artworks and film works. These are medium format images, so that there was a journey down the border of interviews and buying. There was then a journey down the border again of installations and photography. This, for example, the image you can see is Ardmagilligan. This is McGilligan's Point, which is at the very northern tip of the border, just up here. This is the point where the colonial mapping of Ireland, the Ordnance Survey of Ireland, began in the 19th century. So here, this kind of map print that I kind of made onto a truck, the side of a lorry, I installed on the beach and took a photo. The second site is this site here, introducing, this is Boa Island. So it's a large island in Lough Erne. You can actually see that it's a series of islands that kind of cut off almost an enclave of County Fermanagh from the rest of it. And at a partition, the British Army turned these islands into land bridges. This is also a pre-Celtic kind of deity, which is two-faced, the Boa Island Janus figure. The next site along is Clair na Muckaduva, which is the Black Pig's Dyke down here, which is a Neolithic earthwork that you can see in the landscape. It kind of, you can just see these field pattern here where the dike would have gone, and it was non-linear. So this photo that I took is looking from this point along this kind of line of trees, which is the remnant of this earthwork. Again, here I'm kind of traversing the line of the earthwork with these materials now, with the breeze blocks and the signage added. The next site, kind of again arranged alternatively in non-order of the border, is up here. This is the Rainbow Ballroom, the Ballroom of Romance in Glen Farm. And here, this is the only indoor site that we used, and there's a film with the country music being played in rural Ireland. And the final site is, again, moving back along the border, just down here to the end, which is the Park Hotel in Omeath. So this is, anyone has any knowledge of Irish history, so in the Easter Rising, one of the revolutionaries was called Patrick Pearse. This site here is a former Irish college where he wrote the lines of the poem Ireland and Free, or the oration that he gave at a funeral, Ireland unfree shall never be at peace. This work along the border was working really well, and I was really happy with it, but I wasn't happy. I didn't feel fully resolved for me. And one of the things I began to think about is what happens when you draw a line across an island. And the scale of this 500-kilometre site, even though I'm intervening it in key places, you can never see it all at once. And I felt frustrated with that. So I began working offshore off the coast of Cork on Cape Clair Island here. This is the last landfall, the most southwesterly inhabited part of Ireland. And here I began to ask the question, you could actually see at scale that what happens if you give this part of this island here and draw a line and give it to the neighbouring island. Now, that question is incendiary in many ways and very challenging, but it was part of opening a conversation with different residents on the island. This is also an Irish-speaking island, so there were other kind of borders that began to come into play here between being onshore and offshore, land and sea, between the English language and the Irish language, and between how we can begin to talk about contested landscapes in different forms. So actually, it took going offshore that far from the border to be able to talk about the border in a different kind of space, which made the kind of work I'd been doing along here transferable. Opened it up in a different way. You can see this building here. I installed the framed works as an exhibition in the social club on the island. And I began to pair different things like arrangements. So we have the arrangements in sight, and then we have them in the frame as well. This is the poem from Patrick Pearse Wrote. Here we have another poem by a poet called John Montague, who was from the neighbouring county to where this installation was. That's the same one. But there is Brownfield translations. There was a Heaney poem called January God, which was about the figure on Bower Island, and so on. And again, it began to integrate with these layers of existing on the walls in the club with other ephemera as well. The last thing that I did as part of this, and I kind of almost finished now, I'm at 11 minutes, is I took all these conversations that I had in the first phase of the project, conversations I'd had with these other experts, technical data about the materials, other histories, and began to make this non-linear performance lecture, which I delivered in August 2023, which was really a way that the funding from the LRG, I didn't expect to do this, and actually I think it kind of took the project in a different direction, but it was led by the doing of the practice, which was so brilliant to have the freedom to do that. I gave a lecture as a non-Irish speaker in Irish to an Irish audience in this club, which was, as you can imagine, totally terrifying, but became like a really rich discussion. There were people from who grew up in West Berlin. There were people who were from Cyprus in the room, as well as local people. So it became this really interesting discussion and kind of really intimate discussion. So yeah, that's the alternative arrangements that I did as part of the Hedge School. Thank you again to the LRG, and yeah, looking forward to chatting more in a bit.
Thank you, Tom, for this really, really interesting journey. I think you also gave us lots of questions to think about. I'd like to come back to you in our discussion session, but from the conflicts of Ireland's borderlands to another contested landscape of Palestine, I can pass the floor to Jens, please. Thank you, Jens, for this very, I don't know, heartbreaking journey, and also so provoking. I think the questions you posed at the end are very meaningful and deep, and we should all be thinking about. And just to add to your sentence or positioning about LRG funds, I think this is one of the meaningful aspects of the LRG funds, which is empowering more research in different areas that sometimes are hard to fund through conventional funding lines. So I truly hope that we can elevate this in a bit, or try to be positive in this area, or adding a footprint there. Thank you, Jens. And I think the questions you added are really interesting and exciting, and we can all think about. And also, as you mentioned about outputs, I think also research has this value of posing questions. It doesn't always have to propose answers. So also proposing questions are important for research progression anyway. So from my point of view, I think this is also a good output for a research fund, just to have us think more about what are we doing and how to move forward. But yeah, let's take this to our discussion session. And now for a more heartfelt research from the Landscapes of Care theme, Ioana and Valerio, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Merham. To share my screen. Can everybody see our screen? Yeah, okay, perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much for inviting us and for putting this wonderful event together. It's lovely to see what everybody else is doing. And of course, thank you very much for funding the project. Yes, so my name is Ioana Petkova. And
I'm Valerio Massaro.
And we are going to talk about our project Common Gardens today. We're both based at LSBU, London South Bank University. So the project comes from, we both have background in architecture and trained as architects. So the project comes from an interest to find ways of practicing, which are foregrounding new values in the built environment and looking for new ways to practice.
So the project that we call Common Garden was effectively a way to nurture a collaboration between London South Bank University and Loughborough Farm, more specifically a group of architecture tutors and students, and a bottom-up community farm in South London. The project had for us the opportunity to explore a few key ideas. The first one is that most sustainability policies are top-down and often ineffective in impacting ecological knowledge and awareness. Local situated ecological knowledge exists even in dense urban environment. It's important just to find ways to listen, record it, share it, and make it legible. Secondly, we believe that design can be a medium to share knowledge horizontally and produce new social ecologies. This discloses a potential for alternative pedagogies and community building. And thirdly, thinking with the commons allows alternative ways of making and owning space, even in highly financialized urban environments like London. So to summarize, Common Garden is a project that intends to think about the commons ecologically.
What do we mean by commons? A quote from Stavros Stavridis here. Common space is a shared space. In order for common space to remain common, there must be developed forms of contestation and agreement about its use and character, which explicitly prevent any accumulation of power, especially any accumulation of situated space-bound power. Common space that is developed through such movement action is in-between space, threshold space. Common space happens and common space is shaped through collective action.
Sorry. What do we mean by ecological thinking in the context of the garden? I'm going to quote philosopher Isabel Stengers. The ecological perspective invites us not to mistake a consensus situation. Ecology doesn't provide any example of such submission. It doesn't understand consensus, but at most symbiosis, in which every protagonist is interested in the success of the other for its own different reasons. The symbiotic agreement is an event, the production of new, immanent modes of existence, and not the recognition of a more powerful interest before which divergent particular interests will have to bow down.
A bit of background information about Loughborough Farm. The farm was founded in 2013 by a local organization named Loughborough Junction Action Group, and their aim was to improve the well-being of local residents. They still have a steady group of volunteers coming in every twice a week, having farm sessions and tea and cake. The farm started simply through a set of builders' bags where the local residents could grow, and they were borrowing their land from the nearby, their water from the nearby estate. Then the first structure arrived in 2015, the plant room designed by the architect Tom Dobson. In 2022, the redevelopment of the site led to the opening of a social co-working space called LRG Works. Tom Dobson was involved in this redevelopment as well. And this actually formalized the right of the farm to stay, because it gave them the opportunity to sign a 25-year lease with the council, so they could remain on site.
The first reason that we started this collaboration, it was to expose students to a different form of knowledge exchange, in order for them to have a direct interaction with an existing community and a site, and find their way of experiencing a site rather than looking at books or screens. This is, through the conversation, the site that became the focus of the project and negotiations. In a way, it's the leftover of the leftover. It's the triangle that is enclosed between the site and the railway. And talking with the community, emerged the intention to reinstate what they called the Wildman Yard. They had previously a space that was overgrown, and it was a place where volunteers could get lost and replenish. And to these days, in fact, mental health is an important key aspect of the community, which is today working with NHS social prescribing programs. Through the work of the students, we also got to know a lot more about the site. It's one of the largest estate in the country, Loughborough estate. Before then, it was heavily bombed military base. And that particular site became a kind of the center of the project.
So the project developed in 3 consecutive years, and at the end of each year or each stage, we actually delivered a small structure and usually a public event. The first year we worked on an set of outdoor furniture, planters, and seating. The second year we worked on a small stage, and this year we are refurbishing the plant room. These are some of the photographs of the first year. There were a lot of co-design workshops going back and forth. We ended the year by organizing 2 events. The first of them was at university, and it was called Common Gardens Dialogues, where we invited scholars, but also farm volunteers and local authorities to discuss their experience, their research, and their work. The second one was called Common Gardens Practice, and it was about exchanging more practical skills on the farm. And it was organized by local organizations who would lead public workshops about healthy eating or DIY energy sources or composting and so on. The second year, we actually put a brief together with the farm. And we ran a student design competition. This was the winning design. The farm volunteers were actually the jury for this design competition. The design ended up developing and changing, and we discovered a lot of local suppliers who actually we're still collaborating with about getting reused material. There was also a really important part of the design was a collective textile piece, which the farm took the lead on. And this was in collaboration with a local artist, Rebecca Ryan, as well as the farm volunteer, Heather Seal, where participants in the workshop were engaging with the site by collecting different plants on the farm and dyeing this collective textile piece. This was the piece on the structure, the end. It took us about 4 days with the help of an experienced carpenter to put everything together, and the students and the farm volunteers were helping as well and being part of this process. And everything was a reused material apart from the post. So we had pieces of timber that came from film sets in West London. We had some pieces of timber that came from terraces in Tottenham Court Road. So it was this kind of material with history.
So this is the photograph as a reminder of the site before the project started. And we will see the transformation. What is important for us is that the project is a way to reinventing not only the landscape of the site. So the stage was not the project. The stage was a catalyst in order to appropriate and own the space. In fact, interventions around the space started even before the structure was physically being built. And this transformation, this way of owning, appropriating this piece of land started way before. At the moment, there are plans, in fact, for events and for the making of a pizza oven next to the stage.
And this year we are working on the plant room and refurbishing the plant room, and this is still yes, ongoing. But we also started, because it's our last year, we started to conduct interviews with participants, trying to find out how they experience the process. And our particular focus was on pedagogy and the possibilities of the scenarios and community farms at large as places to exchange knowledge. And some interesting points that came out were that actually community farms are very particular spaces where we can learn things that are very different from a practice setting or an academic setting. And some of those benefits include horizontal knowledge exchange. We learn to challenge what we understand by productivity and what productive is. We started to think about design value, which goes beyond something which can be quantified. Students and volunteers thought and reflected more on valuing their own knowledge and skills. And as in general, everybody had rather positive experience because they felt they were making meaningful change in the world. We also ran some assessment, assessment with our public participants in the events, and most of them said they felt an improvement in their well-being after the workshops and the engagement with the farm, and half of them were confident to start gardening or keep on gardening. Most of them found the skills easy to apply, but 38% actually lacked access to a garden or to land.
So just to conclude with some primers, one of the key ideas that we are working on is that within design thinking, design ceases to be a professionalized, outcome-oriented activity, but rather becomes a medium to share and exchange knowledge horizontally.
And actually, a lot of the existing research on participation focuses on the process, but here in this case, what emerged is actually that form, not only the process, but actually the form matters as well. The way that, the timber was treated, or the detailing, and the way that they were done to replicate the same structure again and again. Form did matter in a way, and what emerged as a kind of idea from this project was this idea of common form as something that is common. It's an everyday urban artifact that relates to our sense of well-being, but also common in terms of Stavridis commons, something that records collective projects to improve the city from the bottom up. And of course, there are many gardens and sites around us where both ecological thinking and common form happen every day. But we don't really have the framework to actually think about this in a bigger network. So this project actually led to the opportunity of us to get another grant where we could think about this bigger network. And this is another research which we're starting now with our colleague Elizabeth Hassa. And it is more focused on a bigger group of farms, but also on well-being and participation. And we would like to finish on all the people who are involved in the project with a big thank you. And yes, thanks again to the Landscape Research Group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ioana and Valerio, for this really, really interesting project. I'm personally intrigued. Thank you. And I would love to visit the site one day whenever I'm in London. Thank you for all the experiences and lessons learned you shared with us today. I think all of them resonate with hopefully all of us, but personally it resonates a lot with me. So yeah, come back to you in the discussion session, but now we'll be heading to our final presentation for the day by Michael Feinberg about colonial landscapes again, but with literature. Yeah, Michael.
Hello, everyone. I'll say good afternoon to all of you back across the Atlantic Ocean. It is early in the morning back here in upstate New York. Thank you all for joining. I think you can see my PowerPoint. So the research that I've been conducting with much appreciated support from the LRG group is going towards a current book project that I'm writing. That book project entitled Tides of Revolution and the Establishment of Haiti explores how illustrated books brought representational practices from the Americas to Europe during the years surrounding the Haitian Revolution. The illustrated works were written by Britons tasked with imposing colonial governance in Saint-Domingue and the adjacent colonies of Jamaica and Suriname. However, the illustrations strain to maintain their desired colonial vantage points or even imperial ideologies. From a Surinamese voodoo priest atop the cleared terrains of a plantation to an engraving of Toussaint Louverture emerging from sugar canes, these European engravings illustrate colonial resistance. Some even appear to incorporate indigenous and diasporic symbols. I contend that the friction between authorial desire and pictorial representation stems from the ways engravers drew on Latin American artists' depictions and understandings of the earth. British engravers used landscape to manipulate indigenous American and diasporic African motifs. Distance views, shading, and geometric order helped integrate these symbols into a larger vision of a colonially built environment. However, the materiality of print strained their efforts. Ultimately, these illustrations retain unwanted traces of the symbol's original meanings. At stake is an understanding of print as a transnational and cross-cultural form of media that challenges Western-centric narratives of art history. So this is the larger project, but now I'm going to zoom in on one of the case studies that the grant allowed me to focus on, which is also the first chapter of this book. That case study is Edward Long's The History of Jamaica. It's one of 3 case studies that the book covers. Long's History of Jamaica consists of 3 volumes that claim to survey the island's entire political, economic, cultural, and natural histories since Britain seized the island from Spain in the 17th century. In the first volume, Long discusses Jamaica's topography and positions the island in relationship to Britain's other colonial settlements. In the second volume, we get a layout of the various populations that live on Jamaica. That also, it's also in the second volume that we get 6 landscape prints. In the third and final volume, Long describes botanical and animal specimens. It also ends with an appendix of various legal documents, including edicts from the King of England, as well as a translation of the Code Noir. Despite Long's claims of providing readers with an encyclopedia-style study of Jamaica, History of Jamaica maintains a closer semblance to an extended commentary. His chief aim was to promote the island's improvement and secure Jamaica's status as the most profitable colony in the Caribbean. From Long's vantage point, Jamaica could become even more successful if it were to copy or borrow the Code Noir that the French used on the nearby colony of Saint-Domingue. To encourage Britons to adopt their own version of the Code Noir, Long occasionally pointed to evidence of Jamaica's dilapidation. For instance, he lamented planters' self-interestedness and lack of decorum. He also complained about enslaved people who often rebelled, voodoo ceremonies in the woods, and even enslaved persons who allegedly poisoned Europeans. Keeping the goal in his terms of, quote, daily improvement, end quote, in mind, Long treated these more troubling aspects of Jamaican society as brief aberrations rather than a pattern that would actually indicate the fragility of imperial power. Now, Long included landscape imagery, including these, in his book to set the stage for colonial improvement. Throughout Volume 2, he uses these images and textual descriptions, quite literally calling both the descriptions in landscape a beautiful picture. That beautiful picture as the term that refers to the Jamaican topography as the physical place, but also the beautiful picture of colonial governance. Readers were supposed to appreciate the natural beauty of tree clumps, the azure ocean, the verdant mountains decorated with just a few buildings. Long took Jamaica as the picturesque, as an example of picturesqueness, but he also called colonial governance picturesque. In his words, quote, "The laws afford to the spectators a striking picture of the legislative and executive departments as molded by our happy Constitution, each harmonizing the other," end quote. By mixing descriptions of topography and governance, the history of Jamaica's landscape imagery also then functioned as the planters' desired social order. It helped both the descriptions, images, and colonial governance all came together to both make Long's complaint seem less threatening, but also to present Jamaica as ripe for improvement while hiding all evidence of any kind of dilapidation. However, and this is where funding became crucial as well as archival work to actually see what Long's own copy of History of Jamaica looked like. This archival work showed that Long was invested in changing with a quite fierce take to the pen and even knife to the page 20 years after this work was originally published. Torn out pages, crossouts, and scrawled annotations leave filling all empty perimeters, leave very few of the more than 1,400 total pages intact. Importantly for me, all but one of these images is removed from his own copy. According to library records, this personal copy with these profound changes indexes the desire to publish an updated version of Long's work 20 years later. However, the main impetus of my own research then becomes the question of, well, why did Long want to update his work 20 years later? My archival work, or my outcome, suggests that Long extracted these prints from his personal copy, not only in preparation for a republication of his work, but also because that they became a troubling portal into a social disorder that he, his readers, and publishers didn't actually ever want to see. For instance, replacing this picture, a view of the bath at Hot Spring, is an extended description of a traveler to the spring who, according to Long, quote, and this is his added description and handwriting quote, a European figure whose mule might stumble or fall on slippery stones, in which case you either break your bones or dash out your brains, end quote. So quite a violent image of human corporeal disaggregation now, replacing this image. So while illustrating a site needing just a little bit more attention, the print opens onto a spectacle of a fragmented human body that became jumbled up in a tumultuous environment. So thus, at the crux of the history of Jamaica and his own copy is a larger problem about the unreliability of vision and the failure of pictures and texts to actually cast out or obscure a vision of a world that no one wanted to see. What I believe ended up happening is that its prints created an undesired disjunction between what Europeans wanted to see and what they actually saw on the ground level. Rather than linking Jamaica to desired scenes of a forever enduring and uncontestable civilization, landscape linked Jamaica to personal experiences in a disordered world. Quite literally, at the time that Long returned to his work in preparation for this publication, it became, became harder, if not downright impossible, for Long to actually see Jamaica as a picturesque, serene, and tranquil place. Indeed, he inserted several newspaper clippings into his own edition. These newspaper clippings come to us not only from the early 1790s, but are of particular reports of what we now call the Haitian Revolution on the nearby colony of Saint-Domingue. So quite literally, now included and jumbled up in his book are quite literally newspaper clippings reporting that the rebellions of enslaved people are not only getting quite hard to manage, but they may even move over to the island of Jamaica. So ultimately, what my research is showing is that what was driving him to republish this work, to be clear, that republication never happened, was not so much no longer this desire to claim that Jamaica could continue to be tranquil or colonially managed, but rather a larger process of trying to manage an undesirable view of what the Atlantic world had become. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michael, for this really interesting journey throughout history. So now I'd like to give the floor for any from our audience. If you like to ask any of our presenters for today, please unmute yourself, or alternatively, just drop your question in the chat box and we can say it loud, address it to the presenters. So till we have any questions from the audience, I'd like to thank you all for your really, really interesting presentations for today. I think despite that you're presenting from two different themes and from very diverse geographies, I still can see lots of similarities across 5 presentations we had today, and I think they all shows agency of landscapes and the urgency of engagement and getting out of our comfort zones and learning more about landscapes through different eyes of the people, of the communities, of literature and experiences. So thank you for this really interesting presentations and work. And just to go on the positive sides, would you like to share with us any of the positive experiences you had throughout your research in a year? Would you, give any advice to the ones who will apply for this year? Yes, Shirley, sure.
Yes, I wanted to say thanks from us as well to the LRG for the funding. And I really agreed with what Jens said, but from a slightly different perspective, that I think what we found so valuable with the LRG funding was its flexibility, and that we were able to kind of follow where the research took us. And that led us to finding out, I think, really meaningful things that sometimes get lost when funding is very kind of hidebound with very particular expectations. So thank you from us.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Yeah,
can I follow up? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure, Jens, yeah.
I don't know how to raise my hand here in Zoom.
No, it's okay.
Okay,
Just
sorry. No, surely I agree. And it's very uncommon to find an organization such as the LRG, which is so uncomplicated with funding. I'm a trustee, just as a disclosure, but nevertheless, it's quite difficult to find organizations who are, in universities, for example, it's incredibly difficult to get money to individuals and communities because everything needs a paper trail somehow, no? And the LRG is kind of willing to take a risk when it comes to kind of funding, projects which are usually outside the scope of academic funding. So that's, a very positive aspect that we've also come across. And then the willingness to learn also. So that need for emergency spending somehow triggered then a wider debate about whether there should be reserves for, for hardship situations. So, the trustees and the chair at that time, we kind of took that on and discussed whether we should set some money aside for that. No, so it's kind of also like we're learning and we're kind of adapting, to the experience that we have, which is also why it's important that everybody shares what they have kind of experienced as part of their research as openly as possible. So that's just a kind of a note of appreciation. Thanks, Merham and Shirley.
Thank you. Ioana, Valerio, yes?
Yes, we had actually a wonderful experience. Thank you very much. We would encourage everyone who would like to apply because not only have you given us the freedom to actually pursue our interest, but also it was an amazing platform. We actually got contacted by other scholars who found us through the platform. And it was a great collaboration. So we're very, very grateful for that as well.
Yeah, I think this is one of our aims in LRG and, connecting scholars together throughout the world. I think this is one of, yeah.
Yeah, no, I want to add what everyone said already, but it's true. I think the level of flexibility and creativity in a way for us was also very important because as we mentioned, the initial intuition was how do we challenge the profession itself and the way we understand design. And in a way, If you have expectations, you're unable to do that. If you need to quantify the outcome, you're unable to do that. So I think we could really embrace this idea of thinking about the process in a way and diverting the fund to all sorts of things, because we end up building stuff for the community. But again, it was not necessarily the intention. In a way, that's kind of what came out.
Yeah, Tom, please.
I mean, at the risk of repeating what everyone else has said, I think the thing, I had like a structure of a plan in place of what I wanted to do, but the conversation with the LRG and with the people I was kind of talking with in the sites was really open, so it allowed for to be responsive and to change and to shift as I went along, and that was really transformative in that I didn't know quite where I was going to finish in some ways, but that was kind of embraced by the LRG, which is just so rare amongst other funders. So it kind of really centered giving money to practitioners, giving money to projects, rather and making them happen, rather than kind of layers and layers of admin. It just felt really clear and straightforward, and just you could focus on doing the work, which was the point, I guess. But thank you again.
Yeah. You're welcome, but I think this is always the essence of doing research is, we never know where we are heading. We just have an idea in mind, and then we embark on our journeys, and it turns out sometimes more fascinating than we envisioned that. So I think, yeah, and this is what we believe in landscape research group. So we try to facilitate this, and also for early careers, I think this is really, really important when we really don't know where we are heading, and we need more experience to actually know. And also, interdisciplinarity is another important aspect of, including artists. And I think physiotherapy for our group now and literature, all fascinating results. Really, it gives us another idea of how landscape can transcend, disciplines and give us more perspectives on different aspects of life. So I think, yeah, thank you all for your research and your hard work throughout the year with us. And I would like to also engage with you in a discussion about public engagement. How do you think we can transcend, landscape research to actually have a meaning in people's life and public engagement? I think Ioana and Valerio, you have lots of expertise in that right now. Also, Shirley, Tom, I think you all engage with the public. And do you have any idea or, give us some insights on how to create this? Yeah, please, Tom.
I think one of the things that I feel really conscious of, I think it connects to all the projects in different ways, is engaging with a public is really broad, and I think it's in my experience, I was originally going to do like a kind of more formal public engagement thing, like a workshop or something, and I had to really respond to the site, to the landscape, I guess, of where I was working in, and it just wasn't appropriate. So then I had to rethink what public engagement was. Sometimes it could be a workshop, fantastic, in different places. But in my case, it became, well, what does meaningful engagement look like? And is kind of a one-on-one conversation with someone in a quarry as useful as, a lecture to 100 people? And in my case, yes, it was. So it was really reframing what school looked like, what engagement meant, and rather than just doing it, that actually that kind of conversation led the shape of the project. So kind of, I guess I was really trying to listen, and I had a conversation with one of the organizations I was working with in Derry, or I was in touch with, and we both just decided that actually a traditional engagement would have been really, like, you wouldn't have worked, and it didn't ever want to be extractive, of course. So just to kind of, I guess, think about what works in the specific sites you're working in, and that will never be one size fits all.
Thank you. Ioana, Valerio, would like to add something?
Yeah, you want to go first?
Yeah, maybe what helped us a lot was that the farm already, Loughborough Farm, luckily had already a very strong community and network around it. So this definitely helped us in reaching out to more people. So identifying local stakeholders or groups that might help with public engagement a lot, I think.
And I will add to that for sure, I mean, we enjoyed organizing the workshop and the events, and we gather contacts, this kind of, we networked, but this is very straightforward. I think what really was the key for us was the slowness of the project.
Yeah.
The fact that we had the opportunity because of the kind of research. And again, it's not a professional endeavor, but doing this workshop in a long term, I think we tapped into a different kind of relationship and understanding.
And
reciprocity. So the farm for us in our mind now really is just this contested site on which different people manage to produce different things and created this ecology. And we are the one benefiting from it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We are the early career researcher who actually are able to explore things. We are not, and that's something we talked a lot about, this kind of extractive nature of research that can be there. And that's why I think for us that what changed the game is the slowness, the ability of diluting this over a long time, which is unheard in the profession, for example, in architecture or design.
Yeah, Shirley and Claire, yeah.
Claire, do you want to say anything, or?
I don't think I have anything to add really to what's already been said. Do you, Shirley?
I think one of the things that we found as well was that process of kind of trying to circumnavigate that notion of the researcher and the researched, so that you know we were equals, became really kind of productive, and one of the things that we found most satisfying from that was that the people we were working with are partners, and we very deliberately called them Walker partners rather than subjects or anything like that. You know, they contributed so much to the discussions to the point where they were often leading discussions, and us as researchers were learning a huge amount from them, which was fascinating and really productive and enlightening.
Yeah, I think this also takes us to Michael and Jens' really intriguing questions that you bombarded us with. We have no answers to, but it's all about knowledge co-production, and it's who really has the knowledge, how do we frame the knowledge, and how to reach knowledge, what is knowledge? I think these are all questions we have been asking in the last years, but we still need more research to answer, I think. Jens, Michael, would you like to add something to this? Do you have answers, Jens, to your really intriguing questions?
Answers. Well,
where to begin? I don't know. Maybe we don't have answers, but do you have lines?
I don't have answers. I mean, well, the decolonial canon or the decolonial thought, the conversation, as many terms it, no, is not is a good starting point. So it gives the right vocabulary, although it does not account for the situation of violence in Palestine right now, no? So decolonial thought kind of comes from a different context, no? Latin American thought and so on. But a lot of the research and the vocabulary that is mobilized there, which is to kind of cross between theory and practice, no? So we don't isolate practice and material questions from the question of knowledge, no? So it's a kind of an intersection, right? And that is, I think, is key to understand. So there's lots to learn from the decolonial conversation in that regard. I think, but there might also be shortcomings that we have to think about, because it's also, I mean, well, in the West, it's been now appropriated, no? So every university is kind of decolonizing the curriculum and blah, 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 all this bullshit, no? But if you take it serious, as a kind of a serious project, no, there is kind of agency in that. So that would be a good starting point, maybe. I don't know if that's a good question. Something that Landscape actually has done for a long time is to understand like if you look at the projects here, a lot of them are kind of, you know, co-production and so on, is, you know, to not separate that bifurcation between object and subject, or the researcher and the to be researched and so on, no, but kind of bridge this divide, because we as kind of people in landscape, we're kind of a lived, you know, we have a lived experience too, and everything is kind of a lived construct somehow. No, it's not a clear binary. What was I going to say? There was one thing more, but I forgot. I should write it up though. If I think of it, I put it in a text and put it on the landscape exchange. I remember now.
Michael, do you have anything to add from your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that something that's become important to me is seeing working in an archive as really key, but also in and of itself as a form of praxis. So, you know, I think, you know, amidst this, I'm going to call it, we're living in a kind of flashing point, where we hear a lot of buzzwords and a lot of concepts about things, right? Like we need to decolonize this, or we need to, you know, X, Y, and Z. But it oftentimes becomes unclear to me what a lot of times we even mean by these terms, and if we even have a consensus around what these terms mean. And so something that's become really important to me is thinking about how these kind of frameworks developed out of a body of work that, you know, I think of, let's say, Trouet's work about the silences in the archives, or these large questions about how archives seem to erase things. But the more and more time I spend looking at 18th century documents, and, you know, quite literally reading what authors said, or, you know, what they are talking about, it becomes clear to me that actually a lot of what we think is erased or silenced actually may not be totally erased or silenced. And indeed, right, so for me, right, one of the biggest claims I think about is this claim about the Haitian Revolution being one of the most silenced things in Western archives. But yet for me, right, Edward Long is a case study that maybe it actually isn't silenced so much as it has to be heard, noticed, and felt by reading between the lines and looking for other clues. So I think maybe, you know, sometimes it's helpful to kind of take a step backwards and get into the weeds of, you know, the original evidence we have, and to use that maybe as a practice. And, you know, for really to begin to think about, let's say, decolonizing curriculum, or thinking about shifting away from, we'll call it in my realm, right? The big thing in my field now is to kind of shift away from Western-centric narratives of art history. I think we have to actually look at the archives to see how these narratives were built, and potentially to ask the questions about how they were built, but also how a lot of maybe these narratives are built around very particular readings that might be, I don't know, ignoring the fact that we have Edward Long quite literally clipping newspapers about the Haitian Revolution, I think is also really key, maybe, to at least thinking about what a practice of actually doing the work might be. And we might even begin to think about that in and of itself as maybe a decolonial endeavor.
Yeah. I think thank you all. We have already tipped our timing a bit, so I would like to conclude if no one else have anything to add. We didn't receive any questions from the audience, so thank you all for all your efforts throughout the years, for this really, really interesting research and outputs you shared with us. I think the insights we concluded with are really exciting, and maybe we ended up with more questions than answers, but I think this is the real essence and passion of research. Rachel, would you like to add something by the end of our session?
No, Merham, I'd just like to say thank you to you for running this session so well, and thank you to everybody. And just a little plug, don't forget LRG is a membership organisation, so if you're not a member already, do sign up and join us. Thank you.
Yeah, and please consider our research fund for this year. If you are interested, please apply. The deadline is mid-May, so you still have time. We have just opened the application last week. So, and please share among your colleagues and networks. Yeah, and see you in other LRG events soon. Yeah.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Have a great
Goodbye.
week.